It becomes clear when something is a product of its era. You can't look back at things like flapper dresses and disco and not think of the decades that they came from. This same thing can be said about Gex in the 90s. His wit and pop culture references made him the definition of the 90s platformer mascot. But even though he stars in a decent game, there are still things that make me think that Gex probably should have just stayed in the 90s. You'll see what I mean when I complete Gex Enter the Gecko.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of The Completionist, where we don't just beat the games, we complete them. On The Completionist, we have covered a ton of different platforming mascots from the 90s. We feature beloved gaming icons like Mario, Crash, and Sonic the Hedgehog, as well as some other characters that are much less beloved like Bubsy, Cool Spot, and Sonic the Hedgehog. But today, we are here to tackle a PlayStation Reptilian classic.
Spyro the Dragon!
No, I've already done several videos on Spyro the Dragon at this point. No, we already did Croc. What are you talking about?
Scalar.
Scalar? You made that shit up. What the f*** is Scalar?
Oh, don't you know? I thought you were a real gamer.
No.
Scalar.
No, Scalar's not. You made it up.
Scalar's
We're doing Gex. It's Gex, not Scalar. What the f*** power? He like upreses himself?
Scales.
Get out of here. Let's start this video.
Here comes a new challenger! Yes! Danger! Perfect!
So when people think about video game characters who ooze the 90s, they think about Sonic the Hedgehog. And I love Sonic, despite the joke I made earlier. But while Sonic is the 90s, Gex is so much more 90s than the Blue Blur. In fact, I'd say that Gex is 10 times more 90s than Sonic. That's right, he's the 900. And there's nothing more 90s than Tony Hawk landing the first 900 ever at the X Games. But what makes Gex the epitome of this era? Well, he was a wisecracking smart aleck who constantly referenced TV and pop culture, not to mention that kids loved lizards back then. Just look at all these lizard things. So at the time, Gex was one of the coolest characters on any video game console, and he knew it with that sly look in his eyes and that smirk. This lizard was going places. But I never really gave him a chance when I was a kid, so I am excited to take a look at Gex the Gecko's first game. The story starts off with government agents coming into Gex's living room and paying him to travel to the media dimension inside the TV to stop Rez. So Gex takes a briefcase full of cash and goes into the TV to defeat Rez once again. Wait, once again? No, that can't be right. I remember when Gex came out, he was dressed like James Bond and did like Austin Powers impressions. Everyone was talking about how cool this lizard was. I know when I heard about this lizard, and I know what his first game was. Hold on, let me double check just to be sure. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. Well, I'll be damned. This is in fact not the first Gex game like I thought. The first game wasn't called Enter the Gecko. It was just called Gex, and it was a 2D platformer. It didn't even start off on the original PlayStation. No, Gex in fact started out on a little system called the 3DO Interactive Multiplayer. Now, if some of you recognize the 3DO name, it is probably because of the series of pretty awful Army Man games. But before all of that, 3DO was in the console business, and their console bombed hard. Not because it was bad, but because it cost $699. Compare that to the PlayStation's $299 price tag. Come on. So even though the first Gex was the best-selling game on the 3DO and was received well by critics, it disappeared into relative obscurity. But it was a completely different story for Enter the Gecko. They made a bunch of changes from the original game. Developer Crystal Dynamics made the jump from 2D to 3D and doubled down on the quips and the graphics. And you know what? It worked. So while the first Gex game did well, the sequel surpassed it in every way. To put it bluntly, Enter the Gecko is the Joaquin Phoenix to Gex's River Phoenix, carrying on the legacy of their older brother while still being amazing in their own regard. Enter the Gecko carried on the previous game's legacy and sold incredibly well, making Gex one of the more popular platforming mascots of the 90s. And thank goodness this happened when it did, because I cannot see this game being made today. So for a lot of people, Gex Enter the Gecko represents a simpler time, where everything was much more lighthearted and fun. And these people have been calling for a remake of this game to be made. It's not impossible. They remade Medieval and Battle for Bikini Bottom, so why not give Gex the same treatment? Well, that's probably because he shouldn't get the same treatment. In fact, with some of the stuff that Gex says and does in this game, there's no way he'd fly today. So this feels weird for me to say because I actually really like a lot about this game, especially when it comes to the level designs. Each level is a different television channel representing a different genre like cartoons or horror. To start a level, you enter a TV and select one of the missions, which is represented by one of 3 red remotes. This is kind of like how you choose a star on a level in Mario 64, except you can go after any of the missions at any time. You're then sucked into the channel and they all look fantastic for the time. The first level you go into is a toon level and it looks exactly like what you'd want a toon to look like. Everything is bouncy and there are a ton of bright colors and Looney Tune references. It's a ton of fun. It's vibrant and I want to explore this world. And then Gex says, "Hey, I feel like I'm trapped in Boy George's pants." First of all, gross. Second of all, this is a game that's rated E for everyone and is intended for children. Do you think they're gonna know who Boy George is? Who is that joke for? Third of all, this game is intended for children. Why are you making jokes about a person's genitals? I get that it's because Boy George is gay, but it doesn't even make sense. He's feminine, but not flamboyant or campy. This kind of stuff happens all the time in this game, and it can really pull you out of the gameplay, which, as far as gameplay goes, is actually pretty good. You spend most of your time gathering different types of remote controls. The regular missions give you red remotes, but there are also 2 silver remotes to collect. In order to get one of them, you have to collect a certain amount of collectibles that change as you gather them. It makes you feel like you're actually making progress even though you're doing the same thing over and over again. The other silver remote is found hidden somewhere in the level, and they're hidden well and are a ton of fun to find. Finding all these silver remotes unlock bonus levels and boss levels. These bonus levels have you collect a bunch of these collectibles in a certain amount of time, while the boss levels are exactly what they sound like, battles against bosses, and they're pretty cool. Completing any of these will unlock gold remote controls, which can help unlock 3 challenge secret levels, which are really challenging and a blast to play, especially in the prehistory channels where there are tons of lava streams and you're jumping from rafts, and Gex just has to say, "There's a joke here about snail trails, but I'm not gonna tell it." Then why'd you bring it up? If there's something you shouldn't say, then don't say it. In order to get through all these levels, Gex can do a ton of fun stuff, like perform tail bounces to get more air, climb walls, and even perform a karate kick as kind of a long jump. They really play to the strengths of a gecko. You can also use your gecko tongue to eat bugs for lives and power-ups and save yourself from missing an edge, causing Gex to say, "A little tongue now, a lot of tail later." What the f, Gex? I was exploring the level based on kung fu movies. I was not ready for an oral sex joke. And that's not even the grossest one. You also get more jokes against gay and transgender people. Now look, I'm sure it was an innocent and no malice is intended, but wow, did they come out of nowhere? Now, not all the quips are that awful. Most of them are dated and still funny if you get the references. Dana Gould does an excellent job playing Gex. His tone and cadence perfectly captures Gex's personality and makes him stand out from other platformer mascots from the time.
Welcome to Jurassic Park. Keep your eyes peeled for sleaze stacks and bad special effects.
So while Dana Gould's performance and the level designs are great, the character designs are just as strong. Look at these bosses. Mushu is a terrifying pig-cow hybrid, and Rez himself is one of the scariest main bosses I've ever seen in a game. Seriously, look at this guy, Jesus. This creativity can be found with the regular enemies as well. There are Chucky-like dolls in the horror levels, a creepy space stingray in the sci-fi levels, and these awesome golden samurai in the kung fu levels. Oh, you know what else is really cool? A bunch of weird racist caricatures of Asian people doing laundry and selling black belts. What the f, Gex? Even when you're not talking, this game finds a way to be offensive. It's because of stuff like this that I don't think this game can be remastered or remade today. There is no way a game could get away with this kind of stuff and still keep its E rating. But look, I chose my words carefully. I do think this is a good game. It's just a really bad product of its time. And I think that if people really wanted to bring Gex back into the spotlight, a full reimagining is kind of in order. Nothing too crazy like the awful Frogger game on the PS2. Why not give this game the Batman Beyond experience? Rez is back, but the media dimension has moved past television and film. It now encompasses the entire internet, and Rez intends to use it for world domination. Gex would step in, but it's been decades. He's gotten too old to battle Rez head on. He has to recruit some kind of internet pop culture geek to battle for him while he supports them from the real world. This would be kind of a cool way to bring Gex back, you know? You could still even get Dana Gould to play the part and get a cool up-and-comer comedian to play the other lizard, Sal the Salamander. There you go. I decided it just now. Look, not the coolest idea, but hey, it's it's an option. I hope I made it clear that I don't hate Gex. The game is fun, and I think the idea behind the character is great, but we're just in a different cultural climate now than we were in the 90s. But not to mention, it's not appropriate for children no matter what era the game was made in. But see, that's what's so great about video games. We have a bunch of characters and franchises that have been going on for a long time, not just because they are good, but because they are able to adapt with the times. And deep down, I think there's a possibility that Gex can't do that. Someone just gotta step up and do it. So you defeated Rez and collected all 80 of the remote controls. It is now time to reap the rewards. After the weird and creepy cutscenes where Gex seduces Nikki from the Pandemonium video game series, you are free to enjoy a ton of concept art. And honestly, it's really interesting. It's cool seeing a bunch of enemies and locales that didn't make it into this game. Usually, this stuff is kind of ho-hum for me and on a case-by-case basis, but I was really into the stuff that didn't make it in. Plus, the more detailed drawings of the enemies that did make it into the game are really freaking cool. So look, I obviously had some real issues with Gex Enter the Gecko. It definitely reflects the times it came from, and that did hamper my enjoyment of the full product. Then I remembered something. If you really don't like to hear Gex talking the whole time, you can just turn the volume down on his voice and turn up the great music and sound effects. And while the gameplay doesn't do anything new or exciting, it's still solid and a ton of fun. Not to mention that it's a really quick game to complete. When I completed Gex Enter the Gecko, there were 22 deaths. Some of the later levels get really hard and you'll die a lot, especially against the final boss with Rez. 39 red remotes, causing you to explore each of these delightful levels. And also it frustrates me that this is at 39 and not a nice round even number like 40. 28 silver remotes, really lending themselves to the collectathon side of this collectathon platformer. 13 gold remotes, earned from bosses and bonus levels. Ah, there's the extra remote, now we're sitting at an even 80. There we go. 11 hours of total playtime. And one tongue that is way more active than I thought it was. Seriously, for that tongue, it seems that it's always tail time.
So look, at the end of the day, I like this game. I think it's a fun time. Enter the Gecko is an interesting game with alright gameplay, fascinating art style, but in the end, it's nothing to really write home about. From a completionist standpoint, it's a pretty easy time to complete, so if you want an easy completion game, this might be the game for you. I will say though that I can't seem to shake this uncomfortable feeling I get with the character of Gex. The way that he was written, the way that he's performed in this game, it just doesn't seem like this is a children's platformer. And it's not even that it's meant to be a rude platformer or a crude one either, right? Like, you look at Conker's Bad Fur Day, you know what Conker is, it's an M-rated game, you know the character, you know the world about Conker right away. This doesn't have that same feel, even though Gex the Gecko is kind of this really pompous and I don't want to say gross, because in the end, I'm trying my best to not sound white knighty in this instance, right? But at the end of the day, there's something about this character in this game that's just not syncing up with the entire aesthetic. Would I play a Gex game later on after this? I'd love to see where it goes. You know, in today's society, it could be possible that we get a new Gex game, considering that Gex is owned by Crystal Dynamics, which is owned by Square Enix. So it is possible that we could get a Gex the Gecko reboot or sequel of some kind, or even a port, if you will, but I don't know if I want to see it. Would you guys want to see it? Let me know in the comments down below. So hey, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of finish it.
Finish it!